Howdy, folks. Welcome. This is the Road Goes Ever On and On. I'm Mark. This is Sterling. Today we will be discussing Utopia Season 2, Episode 4. We will be reviewing it and dissecting it. So, full disclosure, if you haven't watched the episode yet, full spoilers ahead.
Lots of spoilers.
Lots of spoilers. If you could do us a favor, please hit that like and subscribe button and turn on that bell for notifications. And without further ado, let's get into it.
Let's dive in.
The way this episode started, it pulled the rug from under me because we've been talking about whether it's going to be in the future or the past, and I feel like that first opening scene looked like it was in the past. Like I thought we were in the past.
100%.
The whole time I thought we were in the past, and I thought we were getting all past
Tiny
information.
TV.
Tiny TV,
Right?
the decorations on the
Landline.
wall, landline, the bike that was out front looked kind of like an old bike. Everything
That's like
seemed like it
bike
was.
bike on the lawn. Like that's like I don't know, like 50s,
Yeah.
comfortable with somebody not stealing it. Everything about it felt older.
Yeah, the TV, they were watching an old game show, like the family was all watching TV together. It did not feel like this was happening in the aughts at all.
I know.
So
I saw it and I thought, vindicated.
I thought your theory was correct. I was like, "Oh my gosh, Sterling was right." I was excited because I want more of that past episode or like
Me
past
too. I
storyline.
really enjoyed what they did with that past storyline. It was a bold move, so I was like, give me more.
The one thing that maybe made me think that it wasn't in the past was it didn't seem as sepia'd as the previous ones. So I really assumed even the truck looked old, like that he drove later on. So I was convinced. I was like, this is in the past. We are looking at past, like we're gonna get more past, only to find out that we were not in the past. So that theory, I would say we have two more episodes left. I feel like at least one of them has to be in the future
Right.
time. Like we have to have some
Right. We,
conclusions
we have we
here.
have to resolve some things. Yeah, so my original prediction of it being 3 and 3, I also went as bold as to say that they would be interlacing. I think it's safe to say my prediction is definitely horribly wrong.
I think that one's out, unfortunately.
Maybe we get one more. I don't know. It feels tough at this point to say that. We're definitely not going to get more than one.
I don't even know if we're gonna get another one. Maybe like a flashback. I'm at this point, though. I will say this episode did seem like a setup
Christos.
episode.
I'm
Yes.
going to say this.
Okay.
We still need to see a flashback to Christos. I don't know if it's going to be a hold episode, but we need to see the whole like tree scene.
I don't know if we're gonna get the tree scene.
I'm saying it, and we all know how my track record is.
If anything with Christos, it might be the lead up to Christos. Like what, because clearly Christos is part of a separate organization other than the network that's working against them. So maybe his backstory of like a group that is working against it. But I will say this episode did seem like a setup episode. Like it was setting up a finale, so there might be one more past episode and then the finale happens. But there's a lot of loose ends still.
There's still a lot of loose ends. So I'm definitely wrong on one thing, but I had some predictions on Janus, and I feel like we we may not have concrete answers, but I do feel like we have fingers pointing in directions.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
So yeah, I feel like your idea of Janus was going to be that there was a back door, like an escape, like a troubleshoot. If things went awry, they could.
Obviously wrong about that.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe not.
That was
No,
wrong, but
I don't know.
how but how Janus was going to interact with Jessica Hyde, I still think that that is right. Like
Oh,
my
so she
initial
can
idea
still have
about
a baby.
yes,
Okay.
I thought it was a backdoor so that she could have a baby, and now it's like the choice that was made of which genetic marker
Right.
will still allow her to have a baby. So I'm sticking with that portion. I
Okay.
realize that was a portion of my prediction.
I do feel like it is
I
leading that way with her. Like she is it we saw that she had relations with Ian. So there was that prediction of, when she saw the kids making out and then she wanted to make out and then she made out, looked at Ian's picture and then
and she even she was even explicit with Ian about and Ian got uncomfortable when she got kind of like this level of awkward of saying it's okay, Janus isn't in the Utopia. My father actually put Janus inside of me, so I'm sterile. So shoot your load at me,
you want to do it
which is
again?
always a like it was very awkward, and Ian was kind of turned off at that point. It was like, okay, this is kind of uncomfortable to get this kind of real. But I do feel like that is setting up the fact that it's like, oh no, she's safe, nothing like that can happen. But we have had that setup of like, what would she be like as a mother? So I do think that whatever kind of genetic marker Philip Carville chose, it's going to be a genetic marker that she has.
Like so that a genetic marker that Janus will make her sterile or make her not sterile.
Not sterile.
Okay, so yeah,
So
that's
what does is like if you have this genetic marker, then it just dies and disappears. And so she
right.
doesn't have the effects in her.
Gotcha.
So it's looking for you to not have that marker, and then it does its thing of sterilizing you. I so that's where I think that is going. So I still feel like I was in the right direction, but I made a very wrong choice about that direction. There's no
Right.
back door. You can't reverse it. I do think that once you get it, there's no way to undo it. And if you don't have whatever kind of genetic marker she has, well, good luck
Right.
having a family.
And we'll dive deeper into this, but yeah, it does seem like that Janus, the thing that he changed, is going to target a group, not his group. And we'll dive deeper into that a little bit later. But one theory we did get correct is that Anton is Philip Carvel. Also, I'm very disappointed in myself. And you might be
How's that?
too.
I'm generally always disappointed in you.
Well, so is my family. It's fine. Welcome to the club. You've known me long enough now. I'm disappointed in myself because do you know who the actor playing Philip Carvel is?
Oh no, I'm disappointed in myself for not know who is it.
It's Ian McDiarmid, Darth Sidious himself, the Emperor.
Really?
Yes. And I didn't figure it out until he spoke English later in the episode. He. I heard his voice and I was like, oh my god, that's Emperor Palpatine. And then, like Amazon Prime has their little like cast that if you pause it, and it's sure
Yeah.
enough Ian McDiarmid, and I was like, huh, how did I not realize that?
Sometimes that can be a giveaway, and I do feel like we might have a callback to what actor is playing a role and if there's any significance in that, possibly later in the podcast. Who knows? We'll see.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good catch.
I was disappointed in myself, but as soon as he like when he's speaking all the, it was we found out it's Romanian that he's been speaking, and he wasn't responding to English. As soon as he spoke English, I was like, wait a minute, that's not him. That can't be him. No way, that's him. And sure enough, it was him.
Sure enough. You had a really interesting prediction about Wilson Wilson. So how do you feel about this one at this point? With and I know we're going to get deeper into him, but like
Yes,
surface level, how do you feel about
I
this prediction?
I definitely still feel like he could be Mr. Rabbit, but you know, a caveat to that, I do think that if he's not Mr. Rabbit, he is being set up to be the next assistant, at least. Bare minimum, he is the next assistant. If he's not going to be Mr. Rabbit, he will be the assistant.
I can definitely see that where he's being set up to be an important cog in the machine, but I do agree with you where especially in this episode, it seems like there are things that she no longer wants to do that she's pushing to him. And so to some extent that feels like she is giving up her responsibilities
Right.
and seeing if he is a fit for them. So I'm going to say,
Still
damn,
Mr.
that's a
Rabbit.
good call.
I still
I
think he
think he is
is going to be
going
Mr.
to be the
Rabbit.
next Mr. Rabbit.
Do you want to. I'll tell you why I think he might be led up to be the assistant. In
He
the.
has a name. He can't be. There are two reasons he can't be the assistant. One, he has a name,
Which is the same name as his last name. Just throwing that up there.
but the assistant's name was the and assistant. Two, while he's got a great, like
Beard. He has a nice beard.
he's got nice like facial hair going on. It's not this.
It's not
And I
this.
don't think that you can be the like that's I feel like that is one of the things that they include in, in the requirements. It's like can deal with the good outweighing the bad, can deal with like horrendous situations, does have a little soul patch, and
Two
and so
eyes.
and so for yes, so for those reasons, I feel like he just doesn't quite like if this went through one of those like things where like you put in your resume and it goes through like the filter. I don't feel like Wilson Wilson's resume would actually get to a human
It just
to
get
see like
rejected.
no he's yeah, it's like he actually he could do the job. He could be the assistant, but he just doesn't have like the qualifications that they put in for it. Like specifically the soul patch.
Of course, of course. He has too much facial hair. We should have known that. Speaking of that opening scene, I feel like one thing Utopia has done very well is have that very consistent scene of we see some type of field, grain, and sky, and either some clouds, not clouds, a pyramid, but it always starts with something like that. This time, it started at night. Yes, the scene takes place at night, but I feel this is the first one we saw that started the scene at night, implying the dark intentions of the first character that we're about to see. The evilness and malice that he is about to commit in the rest of his introduction, his very short-lived introduction.
Interesting. Like the thing that I kind of noticed that I'd mentioned previously was that the saturation is cranked up so high that the greens are a little unnaturally green for nighttime, and the night
Right.
sky, rather than being black, is kind of like a very dark blue,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And so it just doesn't love the show. I really love many of the choices that they've made. Sometimes the choices that they've made become more obviously not great, and I did feel like this was one of those where it's like it just doesn't it looks beautiful,
Oh yeah.
but not necessarily natural. But I
I
did, and
I could
so I
agree.
was focused on that versus like thinking about, oh, we've got a nighttime scene, and like why would we do this at nighttime? Like
Well, I had
what's the meaning behind that?
so there was another thing that also gave me a clue that we were going to see some pretty negative things happening. And one of the kids was holding, so I feel like in Utopia we have seen many dolls. We've seen a lot of rabbits. We've seen a lot of dolls and
Yeah, we
eyes.
have.
And this girl was not holding a rabbit. She was holding the big bad wolf dressed as the grandma with the grandma next to her. So this was a wolf in sheep's clothing pretending to be something else, like he's pretending to be this family man, when at the end of the day he was just part of the network, and he was going to do some big bad wolf shit and just wreck them. And I I saw her holding that doll and I was like, okay, because like there was the three kids sitting down, the one girl was holding the doll in the middle, and I was like, that doll is significant. I don't know what it is. You know, he had just talked to Milner. Oh, I talked to some lady, she's British, you got to come in, you got to do it. 24 hours is 24 hours, you know.
Yeah.
That was one of my thoughts, and I feel like this scene they made it look very American. Like they wanted to be
They,
like, this is in America.
I mean, they made it clear to have like in the first like 10 seconds opening shot, as they're looking at this, there is, I don't remember if it was bike or on the in the yard, but there was an American flag that was like
Attached to the
nearby, I
bike.
think the bike attached to the bike, yeah. So they wanted to get that out there. So and then once you hear the accents, as he's on, she takes a phone call, she passes it to him, you can hear it's an American family. And she even makes a comment about the fact that a person on the other end sounds British.
Right. And the music in his
So
truck was very,
yes,
very like
music in the truck was very American.
Mark.
So it was very clear that we were, in with as little kind of like dialogue information as possible. They did do a good job of kind of making it clear that we are in America in this scene, which is a pretty big change.
But I
So I did think that was interesting.
but my eagle eye found something that showed that they were not in America. Did you see it?
Was it kilometers or
No. It was the door handles when he goes in and kills his family. The door, they were handles, like very typical, like the silver bar handles instead of doorknobs, which most American homes have doorknobs. And on the bathroom, it had one of those locks that were the
did it have a
occupied.
bidet?
No, but it had the occupied, not occupied, and like no American house has those. I've seen them in British house, or I've been in a house in London that had them, and I was like, that's how I know that this was filmed in London or England or
That's
wherever.
that's actually one of the things that sometimes, so I'll spend as little time on this as possible because I don't want to get into another show, but I love Ted Lasso. You can tell by the fact that I'm rocking the Ted Lasso. Obviously, Mark was actually rocking the Ted Lasso before Ted Lasso was a Ted Lasso. But one of the things that sometimes bugs me about the show is that it is supposed to take place in the UK, And yet sometimes there's like these slip ups. Like sometimes somebody says soccer, and it's like nobody would ever do that. This last episode, there were feet instead of like kilometers or something like that on a map, and it was like, oh, this is
Yeah.
like how did this get past? That seems like a pretty obvious detail. It just sometimes minor things like that can just rip you out of something. And so yeah, I just without getting too far into that, I did want to point that out, and that can sometimes bug you when you're watching something,
So,
especially like I'm sure like UK audiences didn't notice that, but it's like
oh yeah.
US audiences notice that, and they're like,
Well, honestly,
that's not the US.
I I feel like casual US watchers probably didn't notice that. I feel like just I was looking and, just I instantly saw it, so I was like, "Oh no, like I know we don't have doorknobs like that or little occupied things on the bathroom." So that made me feel like it pulled me out, not pulled me out, but I knew that it wasn't in America anymore.
And yet there are some other minor details that they nail. And I
Yeah.
really do mean minor, minor, minor details. So when we watched episode two, there was a minor detail that I took the time to write some notes on, but I just didn't understand how it applied to the show on a larger scale. So I just took my notes and I shut up because I don't want to like say something if I can't really contribute. And this episode, we had a call back to that, and it's such a minor little contribution that it's very easy to notice. So, and it's possible I even didn't notice other times this happened. So
Right.
twice there have been these kind of radio broadcasts that have been very much in the background that have given some additional flavor that I absolutely love. So let's talk about episode two.
Okay.
This is literally as it opens. So we remember, and we've shown pictures of this, like that violet field, blue backdrop, the pyramid, and we hear some kind of radio broadcast happening as we're seeing this, and it's within like 30 seconds they move on to the guards. So we really don't see this for very long. And then in this episode, when Michael Dugdale is making eggs for Jessica Hyde, and she's like digging in very awkwardly. She's got, I don't know if I can do it, but she's got like her leg up
Leg up
and
here.
like, and just like eating, like,
Like
gripping the foot, like not like delicately holding, but like gripping the fork.
like a
She's
savage.
doing this. Yeah. Um, it's clear that she hasn't been out and about for a period of time, which is interesting. I'm derailing myself, and I'm sorry. The U.S. feels like this is a callback to this, where like this is the Jessica Hyde they were portraying from the beginning.
Right.
Somebody who's like been through stuff and is like no longer very human. Anyways, I'm sorry. I need to get back on my train. So, anyways, there's a radio broadcast.
Hmm.
So we've now referenced this twice. So here's what we've got going on. So the first time they mentioned that the Kazakh government have announced that it's going to continue with plans to have a compulsory purchase of millions of acres of arable land in Kazakhstan. So they're going to be purchasing some of their own land back. And it says that much of it is owned by the China and the United States. So they've like previously sold off portions of their land, that they use for farming to China and the United States, and now they're going through this compulsory purchase to like buy it back, and that the U.S. government they mentioned condemned the move, likening it to Soviet area renationalization. So there was a period of time where the Soviet Union sold some of their kind of like oil land assets
Right.
to other countries, and then at some point around the Putin time when they kind of saw the value of that, they um, worked hard to get that land back and get it into government control. Rather than letting, like foreign sectors be able to control that and profit off of it, to instead have the government be able to control that land and to be able to profit off of them. So we've got that pretty early on.
That's
And
second episode,
they
right?
that's the second episode, and it
Okay.
continues on saying the Kazakh president said that the continuing wheat prices, his nation is struggling to feed his people. So as food prices are going up, the people of Kazakhstan are struggling with being able to feed themselves. So like the really cool thing about this is like this is this feels kind of like the first episode where it's like placing this in a historical place.
Right.
It no longer feels like it is just kind of like theoretical, this what if of like, what if this crazy organization does these crazy things? It actually kind of feels like it's, even if that event isn't real, it feels very real. And it feels like it's putting it in a real situation of like, well, what if food shortages are real? Like what do countries start doing and how does that affect
Right.
larger situations and how do other countries deal with that? So it's kind of interesting actually seeing this in a larger picture. So that was 2 episodes ago. So so then we hear that in this episode, as Michael Dugdale is making the eggs, it briefly says something about China is the largest consumer of wheat in the world. Its harvest is failing, and it's not just going to roll over. I had struggled to understand what it said after that. And then it said like, but it cannot be. And then I struggled to hear what it said after that. And then it said, the person said, America is right. And then I struggled to hear what it said after that. And then they went into, Jessica Hyde asking Michael Dugdale about whether or not he put salt in the eggs and when he put them in. So it kind of cut off at then. The music is swelling at different points, but I don't know. It was kind of cool to put this into once again to make this feel like this is happening during a real period of time
Right.
where real things are happening that are kind of affecting food production and countries' ability to be able to purchase that food, and then the individuals being able to get that. And it's like, how does that deal with the large picture?
Right. And it's almost kind of like connects it to the whole idea and purpose of what the network is going for and everything that they're dealing with worrying about food shortages. We even hear Milner talk about certain shortages that have like this is going to run out by this time, this is going to run out by this time, this is going to run out by this time. This is like not me saying this. This is like what BP is saying, and that is another way tying it in. But what's crazy is when they talk about the master plan, like where we saw that first guy, he left that canister in his car that some other guy's going to go get and drop and yada, yada, yada. When they were talking about that, they were talking about fields that they were going to basically like grab crop dusters from, and one was the US, one was Beijing. I don't know if one was Kazakhstan. I can't remember the other three. There was supposed to be five large places that they were going to do this at, and I wonder if that radio broadcast is connected to where they're planning to spread this Russian influenza.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy that the show definitely feels like it puts in those small details that you sometimes have to spend a little bit of extra time to kind of figure that out.
I don't remember hearing the radio in either of those episodes. Like, I saw the scene with Jessica Hyde and Dugdale, didn't remember there was a radio on. Didn't even listen to the radio. Just over my head.
I was So okay, so you were looking at the fact you noticed that there was a B, and while you were looking at the B, I was like, oh, there's words. What are the words? And it just seemed like a meaningless combination of words. And I had to write it down because I was like, at some point, there is meaning in this. I don't know what the meaning is because this show doesn't seem like one of those shows that wastes time doing things that are meaningless.
No.
So yeah, so that's where I was, and it was kind of in the noodle, kind of bouncing around. We couldn't figure out exactly what the point was, what we were going to do with that. But so then, as soon as I heard them kind of reference China and the U.S. again, I was like, we're talking about the same broadcast. We're continuing this on. I want to see where this goes. I need to write down all the words.
Now I'm going to listen for it. I feel like we're going to hear more broadcasts later, like in the last two episodes. At least one more broadcast, if not both. And now I'm going to be listening for it. I'm going to be like, all right, where's this broadcast? Where is it?
I feel like it's in the past. I feel like we heard some broadcasts about like Russian flu and what was going on with that. And it was like
Right.
this one actually feels more grounded in the real world and feels like it's setting up kind of like a bigger problem. So it was kind of interesting kind of hearing that. So I love this show.
I did too.
I love the show. I love the show. I love the show. But I do feel like we have talked disproportionately well about the show because we've always been comparing it against the US show, which I feel like the US show doesn't really stand up well against it. And
Right.
so I briefly want to be honest about how great or not the show is and the fact that at times things are pretty unbelievable in the show. And this show generally races past details before you can ask a question of how do you fake CCT footage of a child killing other children and
Right.
looking directly up at a camera and we see his face and it's not Grant because Grant never did that. So they never answer these questions, and I do feel like this episode had something that was a little bit unbelievable when Ian goes to infiltrate this news network that has this footage. He goes through a series of unbelievable events. And it happens quickly enough that you can really not notice and just be like caught up in the speed of the scene, because it's like he goes to a coffee shop, and he does this thing where
Which
he like,
which
yeah,
is funny. He was wearing a red beanie at the coffee shop, and then when he goes in, he's wearing a red hat. So I totally believe. I'm totally on the unbelievable side.
I didn't even notice that. So like he bumps into this chair so that the person cannot notice when he takes his coat, which has the
The key
swipey
card.
swipey.
A whole
Yeah, he
jumpsuit.
uses
A whole
a
jumpsuit.
whole like jumpsuit, and that jumpsuit gets him in, and he's able to immediately get to where he needs to get. Like he doesn't need to go to a directory to find out like what office he needs to be
Right.
in and whether or not that key card has access to that or if there's going to be like other key card accesses. And he very quick like there's a lot of footage, right? This is an old piece of footage, so this should take a ridiculous amount of time. He finds the one CD, DVD, whatever it is, very quickly. Oh no, he's going to be caught. Somebody walks in. He does this Jamaicanish thing of pretending to be a cleaner and being pissed off that that person isn't putting away their waste, and is able to get past and out. And a group of people comes and he jumps into a room, puts on another coat, and gets it. Like it's very it
Y-
the first time I watched it through, it was like it's fast paced. Didn't
Right.
even notice it. Second time through, it's like okay, that's not blue. That's not. Oh, that's where it gets
You know what the most
cinema
unbelievable?
sins.
Cinema sins. If you see any cinema
Get it?
sins, leave them in the comments here. Whatever you saw in this episode, put them in the comments. One cinnamon sin that I saw is every time they are looking at the news broadcast, whether it was Grant at the hacker's house, whether it was Ian at the news station, whether it was the Ian later on back at the other place, they're always saying top 10 viral videos. Also, I did notice the first time I saw that, I did notice that the Georgia man kills family, and I was like, that's that guy when Ian goes there. But why is there top 10 viral videos, and every time we see this thing, whether it be 3 days ago, today, tomorrow, it's always the cat in the shark outfit on the Roomba being followed by the squirrel, dog, something? I can't remember. But every single time, it's the same video. But yet, it says top 10 viral videos. Why haven't we seen another one of the viral videos? We just see that same video every time they look at the news. They're like, oh, the news? Viral video.
And is that one of the top 10 most viral videos?
Maybe in like 2009,
Uh,
not 2017, 18, whenever this was made.
yeah. That definitely doesn't feel like that feels like one of those things that rises quickly and falls quickly. That doesn't seem like, which I mean I guess is what viral is, but it's maybe that wasn't in 2016. Maybe like when it came out, it was a very specific viral moment that didn't
Yeah.
last long.
But the
But
same
yeah,
video every
what are
time
the
at the
other like
same spot?
top to right? Yep, always the same moment, always the same spot. Everybody sees it at the exact same time. A top 10 list where it always starts with number blah, blah, blah,
The
whatever that
new
is.
the
We'll just
the
say it's like eight, number eight.
the 24-hour news cycle. News, it's like a 24-hour news channel is what
Yep.
it seems like. But yet every time it's just these viral videos. They've ran out of content. They're just milking what the internet
Right,
does.
right.
I'm also, I know we talked about Jessica Hyde. I am not a fan of her character in this season. I know she went through all this, torture or whatever, but like, I feel like Jessica Hyde has always been living a crazy life, and in the first season, like, she had her crazy moments, but she seemed very, like, in charge and knowing what she's doing. And I feel like in this, like, these couple episodes, I feel like I haven't enjoyed her character. Like watching her when she goes to Dugdale and says, "How long have I been asleep?" Like the Jessica Hyde I know would never fall asleep at Dugdale's who she doesn't know. Like she wouldn't just stay there, right? Like and he even contemplated like calling her in. Like she would like that was a big risk for her to just be like, "Oh, I'm just going to sleep here for 2 days." Like I feel like she could have easily slept like on a park bench somewhere, got her rest, and then came to Dugdale. Like there's just a lot of unbelievable things of like how she interacts with Dugdale, how she interacts with Ian. I just am not it does feel like the US Jessica Hyde where she's just kind of a little crazy. Like I thought she was crazy in this episode.
I can and I can't see that. So I do feel like they did give reasons for this, So she's been playing the long card in that prison, and she finally got the spring from the pen, so she knows that she can get out of handcuffs if they wheel her in order to cut her brain. And so at that point she does the whole like comatose thing, where she just stops responding to anything. And she has to do that for a ridiculous period of time of just staying present and aware, but not responding to anything. So they say, okay, this person is gone. There's nothing more that we can do with this person. We can't question them. We need to cut them open. And that's when she's able to escape. And in doing that, like all the work that was involved of pretending to be like that for a prolonged period of time, she was, I guess, awake for that amount of time. And because of that, she needed sleep for a ridiculous amount of time. So like I get it and I don't get it. And it
I
doesn't
feel
quite
like
feel like
Jessica Hyde would go break into an abandoned place and sleep there. I just some of her
catch
actions
up
I
on
don't believe
sleep
in.
before like going to
Yes,
Dugdale's. Like,
correct.
not don't be vulnerable with
Right.
somebody.
Like she is not that type
I
of
buy
like
that.
putting herself in those bad situations. And some of her interactions with Ian, like I know she loves Ian, but she kind of just seemed like a crazy girl. Just
It's interesting because this feels much more like the Jessica Hyde we met in the US version, which I did not like.
right. And that's why I feel like
But
I
but
never
I
liked
can
her.
but I can at least understand this one. Like I see how she got to this point. I'm not against who she is right now because I at least see the journey.
Right.
And to me, this feels like a real person that I've seen what she's had to go through. We with all this kind of insanity that we see going on, when she finally sees Ian, and is like, I'm gonna do it with you, period. Like we see her scars of what she's been through, and it's for me, it they don't quite nail it like they did in the last season, but I can see why she's changed and why she's doing some of this stuff. And I can somewhat understand this Jessica Hyde.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
If Utopia US version got its second season, do you think that they would pull this love triangle with Becky, Jessica Hyde, and Ian? Like, I feel like this is such an important thing that's been happening. And, in the US version, we see Ian gets married. He, like, proposes to Becky, kind of. And they're more like, I feel UK version, we see Becky and Ian kind of at each other's throats sometimes. They're good, they're bad, they like each other, they don't like each other. Where like the other one, it's like Becky and Ian loved each other. There was no Jessica Hyde. Jessica Hyde was very anti-sex. Like, how
Yep.
would they? And for one that really likes the source material, how would they incorporate that into that first one?
I definitely think they were going to incorporate that because I do feel like the US version would oftentimes trying to take the same idea and amp it up and make it seem even cooler and like make it hit even more. And yet I actually feel like they would generally make it hit even less.
Right.
Like when they did the whole thing with Artemis
Yes.
versus the tramp, it's the same type of scene where she
Right.
ends up like killing a person, but the idea is the US version is like, but what if it's somebody that she likes and respects, versus
Right.
somebody she really doesn't care about. So it's like this has got to be so much better of a scene, and it wasn't. It was a worse scene.
Right.
I like the tramp scene. It was so much better. And I feel like this feels like that. So they're trying to like set it up to make it more powerful. And it's like, what if he proposes ish? I mean, he doesn't propose. He's like this
I don't really believe in
specifically
marriage,
this is not right.
but here's
It's
a ring that Jessica
it's
Hyde gave me to give to you, I guess.
it's almost like it's almost he doesn't even claim it to be a promise ring. It's almost like a promise ring to a promise ring. He's like, "Oh, what if this ring means that I promise to give you a promise ring to eventually promise to marry you?" So it feels like they were laying the groundwork to give it a more powerful impact so that when it happens, people would be like, "Oh, that's crazy." Except
Right.
generally, I feel like their stuff didn't really hit that well.
That's fair. Yeah. I think that they would try to make it seem like it would be impactful, but since the first season they didn't build any of that up, like I believe this because, Jessica Hyde took Ian with her that one time when they went to go see the tramp that made Becky upset. She also forced him to kiss her at gunpoint. So like they were sowing these seeds in that first season for this to be a
Yep.
good payoff of now Ian's torn between these two girls. And even like when Jessica Hyde's talking to Dugdale, she's just like, I'm looking for Ian. I love him, or something along that lines. And he was like, oh, I thought him and Becky were something. And she was like, nope, nah, Becky's nice, but meh.
Right. And I do, and kind of like briefly going along those lines, I have thought about where would the US version of this go. And I do feel like the more that we've seen this, the more that I have seen some of the seeds that they have from this were already in season one of the US version in order to flesh it out to 8 episodes. And so I do kind of feel like if they were going to do season two, that the goal there would have been that they would have to get into new territory in season two.
Right.
That they would hit on a lot of what this season two is doing, but they would have to try and figure out where the show could continue to go and
Right.
kind of really break new ground in order to be able to continue because it always felt like they were behind the current season.
Yeah.
So to try and do a season two, having already pulled material from season two and season one, it does feel like the idea would be to turn this into more than a 2 season show. I
Right.
think they had their eyes on a long prize.
Yeah. So
Like
it's
3 seasons, 4 seasons.
right. But I do feel like they would have had a hard time because I agree with you. Like one specific person, Paul at the mall, he
All at the mall.
you know who he reminded me of?
The Master?
Uh-uh. So Paul at the mall very much reminded me of Charlotte from season 1. Like it was almost
Okay.
like a copy of them, right? He was doing
Oh,
his own
yeah.
thing. He meets Wilson, and she's like, "Here, introduce yourself." He's like, "Oh, I'm Paul. I'm an assistant." And she's like, "No, no, no. Tell him what you're really going to do." And there's so many things that she asks him, like, okay, well, you're gonna, and his whole thing is he's gonna go release the influenza. He's gonna grab the plane from the tank that was hidden in the first scene, and he's gonna like crop dust this area to basically release his flu. And she's like, okay, so hundreds of people are gonna die. How do you feel about that? You're gonna probably die because you're going to be exposed and there won't be a vaccine for it by the time you're exposed. Like, how do you feel about that? And like, the way he talked about it just felt like Charlotte and Lily so much. Like, they were just like, he was just like, at least I did something. Like, it felt like he was saying,
100.
I am finding my place in this crowded world. Like, I saved so many people. Like, I did it for the betterment of humanity. And I thought that was like, I was like, this is where to me, the Lily concept came from. Like, when you see that episode, it was from this episode. That's what I thought.
100%. So, just to catch any audience members up on what I said, which I thought was somewhat telling, I think he might come back because he is an actor that has at least gone on to do something that is important to me. And
Paul at the
so,
mall?
yeah,
Oh, I don't know who that is.
what did I just say when you said, what does he remind you of? And I said, the master.
Is he the master?
He is the most recent The Master.
Oh,
So
that's
I'm
why I didn't
sorry.
know.
If
That's why I didn't know.
Yep. Okay. Hashtag spoilers for Doctor Who. Um, we'll hopefully put a timestamp to jump ahead if you aren't into Doctor Who and care about going on what's going on about that. This actually isn't a big spoiler, so it's not the end of the world. But yeah, he is the most recent The Master in Jodie Whittaker's season of Doctor Who,
Gotcha.
and that to me is a somewhat big role. Like that's kind of important, and so I maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like he wouldn't just be some rando, you know, guy in a mall who is gonna murder himself to kill a bunch of other people in order to save the world. Uh, which is, anyways, yeah. So I feel like he possibly has other things to do. Um,
Okay, okay.
and that's where I took it rather than thinking about the US version. And I definitely see the US version in this now that I kind of see that of like people having that purpose and being willing to sacrifice themselves
And
for
think
the greater good.
and thinking that they're like
Really taken
helping.
from this.
Yes.
Yes, really, really taken from this season, which once again kind of makes me wonder, like, what would season two be like of the US version?
I
What have they got
know.
left?
Right.
Like they were going to they did what they already took, they did poorly. So what were they going to do on their own where they're like, okay, writers, you have to come up with new material
Right.
that hasn't been come up. You did a bad job of taking existing material. Now come up with new material. Go.
I think, I do think their season 2 would have been a really hard task for them. I think that, if they're trying to fill 8 episodes and a lot of the content from season 2 is in season 1, I think they would have had a really, really hard time filling out a full season 2, let alone a season 3 or 4, and man. So I wonder, do you think that they would have brought back Lee?
Yeah, I do.
I think
Because
so too.
man, it's been one of the highlights of the season.
I do like Lee. I really like the scene with Lee and Arby in the barn, and I'll tell you why. Because they weren't
Tell me why.
in the barn, they were in the cellar of the barn. The last time Arby worked with Lee, they were in the cellar of Wilson Wilson's bunker
Right.
when they pulled out his eye. So it was I thought that was a very cool scene of a callback to when they last worked together, he pulled out the eye, and then this time they worked together to basically get Arby's new family safe and kill Donaldson.
Right. That was, it was actually a really interesting scene to, we saw the fork in the road of like the decision that Arby had made, and then he's called back. We think he's going to betray his friends. We still don't know whether or not uh, not his friends, sorry, whether or not he's going to betray the main group. We still don't know if he is or isn't going to do that
I did think it was
completely.
cool when we see a scene with Grant and Arby towards the end, but before that, we see Grant sees the yellow bag, and instead of a penguin he pulls out a gun. And I feel like this was a little bit foreshadowing like their conversation later on.
Okay, so Wilson, we feel like he might be the next Mr. Rabbit.
Right.
Is it possible that Grant is the next Arby?
I I had a feeling about that too. That was so when I watched him pull out the bag, or he went in the bag, he pulled out the gun, and they have that moment where they're sitting on the stairs. And I thought it was a really cool scene where they're sitting on the stairs and they're talking about it, and he said, what's it like? Right? He's asking what's it like to kill somebody.
Oh,
And on the stairwell next to them, it said "Watch your head," and I felt like this was them talking about their heads and like where like their mindsets of how they view killing people. And I loved how they depicted it with Arby, where he said it's like opening a bottle of water. Like water is a necessity to live, and you gotta twist the cap off to drink the water. You gotta
Yeah.
you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet.
It's also interesting when you see signs that end up having completely alternate meanings to take you on a different journey. When you mentioned watch your head, it reminds me when I was in Washington, D.C., doing the Army 10 miler. It's wild seeing the city in this atmosphere where there are no cars and no pedestrians. It's weirdly empty, which you wouldn't expect of a huge city like this. And you're running through these streets, seeing these beautiful things that you normally wouldn't see with, like, yeah, there are crowds in front of you and behind you, but like on either side, there aren't crowds. And I just remember like as I'm running, and I get to this intersection, the the pedestrian sign said it must have said something like it was like walk, don't walk. And it said like don't walk, which to me felt so appropriate for a run. Like obviously it's saying like
Right, don't
you can't
cross.
go across this, you can't cross this intersection. But to me, I was being given the command of like don't walk,
You are not allowed to walk here.
which which is exactly what I'm doing during this 10 miles. Like it's this like it's it's a brilliant command. Like obviously that wasn't the intention,
Right.
but it's interesting how sometimes something can take on a different meaning. And I do wonder if that had a different meaning. It's like, watch your head. I like that kind of angle
Yeah.
of kind of getting into your mental state.
Right.
And they are dealing with that because he does ask Arby a very heady question of, do you feel anything
Yeah.
when you do this?
Right.
And for Arby, it's this very disconnected, very natural thing, just like having to unscrew a bottle to get to the water inside.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm really thinking about this Grant becoming the next Arby too because of this. And we Grant has killed somebody. He's framed for murder. He can't go home. People think he's dead. There's all of these clues. I think you might be right on this one.
It's interesting the way that the different people are being groomed, which makes. So I'll ask another question, which is, did they plan on having it 2 seasons, or is it possible that there was a potential for a third and they were going to kind of continue? So does this wrap up perfectly? Or do you think this was supposed to go on possibly?
I I do I'm thinking that they had set it up for like the potential for a third season. Like we can go further. However, if we don't go further, I think we will see Wilson being Mr. Rabbit. We will see maybe in the next episode Wilson and Grant talk and say like he says, you could be part of what we're doing and then you don't have to run anymore. Like that would be a very, and if you think about it, we didn't really talk about it in the episodes, but we see the first episode of Grant living with Ian, right? And he's
Yeah.
miserable. He's pissed. He's
Yes.
furious. He wants to find Becky because Becky is the only saving grace
Yeah.
for him. I
I think he also wants to see his mom, and like his mom thinks he's
Yeah,
is dead and or
and
killed
shot
these
up
people.
a school.
Right. Right. So he's living this lie, and in his mind, Ian has created this lie and is making him live this.
Right.
So he resents Ian so much
Oh yeah, he
for
hates
this.
Ian.
He really does.
He aimed the gun at Ian. He was gonna shoot him.
Yeah. I really didn't know where that scene went
I
because
didn't either.
he aimed the gun at Ian, and then you see him go down the steps and meet Arby, and it doesn't immediately show if there was like, was there a gunshot, what happened.
Right,
It leaves you wondering how badly did that escalate.
right. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to, take a moment for Miles, our friend Miles. Rest in peace, Miles. I thought you were going to be part of the gang. I thought he was joining the group, and he, tragically, he lived a short life. And I thought Miles was great, and I thought Miles was funny, and then they killed him. They just killed him. Well, Arby killed him.
I assume you're talking about Marius.
I thought his name was Miles.
Marius, something along those lines. But yeah,
Was it Miles?
I was definitely not Miles, but I was right there with you where I was like, oh, we got a new member of the group. Like,
Yeah.
where are we going with this, right?
They were talking so
Um,
openly in front of him that I just thought that he was gonna be part of the group now.
yeah, I mean, like some they were trying to hide some things, but then as he was doing as he was translating some things, like crazy stuff came out. And at one point he was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
He clearly got in deep
Yo, too
and was
deep.
like
Too deep,
was
he died.
not comfortable. Too deep, and then he died. I actually thought that too. I was like, oh, we got a new member of the group, which to me, when you are planning on continuing, I do feel like you generally introduce new people,
Right.
especially since existing members of what you would consider good have split off to what you would consider bad.
Right.
And so, with that being the case, we haven't really been introduced to anybody new.
Right.
And so I do think they are working on that wrap up. And I guess like the thing that was keeping me kind of thinking about jumping to that was like it does feel like they still have a decent amount to wrap up, but then at the same
Yeah.
time the show does have a very fast pace, so they can get a lot of information in a short amount of time and hopefully probably wrap up most of that and or leave us with a somewhat ambiguous ending, rather than like a Hollywood perfect ending. That's kind of my thoughts on that because if you think about another show like Game of Thrones that like continues to go on, I feel like every season would introduce new character. Like when you watch
Right.
that first season, you're like, oh, the cast is so big. How do I keep track of everybody? By the end, you're like, okay, I know who everybody is. And then season two starts, and it's like they're introducing so many people. How do I keep track of
Right.
everybody? Versus, yes, there have been some new characters, but they haven't like the person who works at Dugdale's work, who very quickly died.
Right.
There,
The scientist
that
that wrote
wasn't
about
long.
deals, he died.
He died. Marius joins in. He dies. Like
Pietro's
all the
family, they're dead. Oh, well, they're gone. But
they're gone. Paul from the mall. He's gonna kill himself, so he won't last long.
Paul from the mall.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
I was
I do
thinking.
I do think they're wrapping it up.
Yeah, I was thinking about like Stranger Things. I don't know if you watched Stranger Things, but like the first season they didn't
What
have Stranger Things. It's a
what is
hit.
a what is a Stranger Thing?
It's a Stranger Things. Stranger Things. And the first season, the Sadie Sink character is not in there. Then they introduce her, and then I'm not caught up on it, but I do know that they add more characters.
They yeah, at each season they do add more characters. It
Yeah.
keeps growing and growing. 100%. I feel like that's a good example of like when they're planning on continuing the story,
Right.
they want to introduce more characters. So, Anton, I
Anton.
think we're I think it's safe to say we're right about him.
I think.
What do you think about what's going on with him? Like that's quite a
Well,
thing to
I
chew.
I'm more disappointed that I didn't know that he was Darth Sidious until he spoke English, and then I knew right away that it was him. But yeah, so I'm curious of why he didn't respond to them sooner. You know, he does seem like he has dementia or something where he's not operating on all cylinders. Like maybe he was in the crazy bin for too long and he's not the brightest bulb in the knife drawer. You know, he's got some
Yeah.
things wrong with him. But then like as soon as he drops the act, you know, like they're doing the test, right? They're trying to say all these languages, touch his right hand, saying it in every different language, nothing. And he sees what they're doing, he knows what they're doing, and why once they say it in Romanian, he touches the hand when like he could have just done it at any point. I don't. I just that part I didn't understand why he took so long to show who he was.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, he speaks perfect English when he does.
Right.
I mean, he does seem broken, and we do see that happen after he's speaking English, where Ian at one point presses him about, because he said he made a choice, and Ian presses him about the choice and like what race did he choose? Which for somebody who's been through the Holocaust and had somebody else try and choose to erase his and other races is obviously very heady stuff. And he slips right back into the other language. And so he does seem extremely damaged. And he does
Almost.
seem like he is, on the line of which side of reality he's going to be on, based off of kind of his mental state.
Do you think that he regrets what he did? Like, do you think that he's like that he feels remorse about creating Janus and the things leading up to Janus?
I definitely think he feels the weight of these decisions. I don't know if regret is the correct word, but so if we look back on his past decisions with the current information, what do you think about the choice he made with Arby now that we see what he's been through?
So his whole goal with Arby originally was to essentially make him desensitized to violence, if I remember correctly. It
I
was
I I think it was like trying to take away the ability to do evil. It was kind of like a Clockwork Orange type
right.
situation, except instead of taking a bad person and trying to remove the impulses that made him bad, he was trying to do it with a child of like I think the idea is he was wondering, is there something you could do to a society to remove the things that caused the Holocaust? Like, could you remove those impulses for evil?
I didn't think of it that way, but because I didn't think
And
about his interaction with Arby, but that's
I think that's what he was trying to do with his son, was to remove the impulses of evil, and instead he just desensitized him
violence.
to violence.
Wow. His motive
I
seems a little bit more clear now about why he like I didn't even think about that, like why he did that to Arby. Ooh, that almost makes it
if
sad.
it really does. and I don't think that he could. I mean, you shouldn't. I mean, if you bring this into like a larger scientific debate, like obviously, this is exactly why you shouldn't be doing, like unfunded, unregulated scientific, research on individuals, is
Right.
because you can have these kind of impacts, and they can have devastating impacts. But you can see how he probably couldn't get the funding for this type of research, and it obviously was something that was extremely personal to him. He likely
Right.
lost his entire family. He mentioned the fact that he was in that camp when he was 5. He
Yeah.
had to stay in. He pretended to be one of the dead bodies for 2 days,
As
and
a
and he was in that
5-year-old.
camp with his mother, his father, his brothers, and his cousins. And he did not say whether or not anybody else made it out. And I have a feeling that anyone else did make it out of his
Well,
family.
he did make it seem like his family all got gassed. Like he was talking about hearing the gas and when they all went in and then the bodies coming out.
Yep,
Now, with this background of the Holocaust, do you
yep.
think what he's trying to do with Janus and the who he's targeting, do you think that it has any correlation? That maybe,
I what are your thoughts first, and then I'll.
well, I was wondering if it was almost like in a way a reverse Holocaust in the sense that Janus will target everyone that's not Jewish. I know Jewish is more of a culture. There is, bloodlines of that, but there is like a more of a culture behind it. So I don't know if you could pinpoint genes to say that's who we're taking out.
And also he wasn't necessarily a Jew. He was Roma, which, a derogatory term that you can think of that as like a gypsy,
Right, right, right.
which was another group that was also being killed during the Holocaust. So I think I think that this was like the worst idea in reverse racism, where, instead of saying this is the superior race, we should kill all other races in order to make sure that we only have the superior race. Instead, it's this terrible, sad idea of what if we can kill racism so that nobody has to deal with it by removing all other races? So we can have this perfect utopia where people don't fight amongst each other because they look different.
Which is very similar to that US version. They wanted to create, so based on what we see here, the US version was very much like Home was trying to create a place where there was no racism, there was no sexism, and I see that maybe that is one thing
But
that
in this case, this would be choosing.
right,
And so this would be a form of genocide. And it's weird that it's coming from this sad place instead of this like superiority.
yeah,
It's really and we'll I'll keep this as short as possible so that we don't get into too sad territory. But I did want to say that, we did get some very important information about where exactly Carvel was. So he was at Belzec, and I went to the website for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. We'll definitely add links to this because obviously there is sad and profound information that is kind of referenced in regards to this, but it there is an article in here about the genocide of the European Roma from 1939 to 1949, and in particular, they did mention that he was in Belzec, which I didn't realize that there were some of these buildings, even though this wasn't necessarily the most well known, this is one of the ones that in particular that was more about just kind of committing the murders rather than holding people doing experiments. Apparently was part of an operation called Operation Reinhardt, with the idea being a plan to systematically murder Jews in general government, where there
Oh.
were three of these killing centers. So that was their main purpose, was being killing centers, established as part of this action. So that this was really, I mean, everything about the Holocaust was an insidious thing, but really, really great information. Don't want to spend too long on this because I don't want us to get too down and too dark, but I did think that it was worth kind of seeing where they kind of went with this in the real world. We'll definitely include links about this. And yeah. So with all of this sad information, I'm going to do my best to try and pivot and say I think we've come about to the end of kind of some of our ideas, and I
Well,
think,
I
do you have any questions?
well, I do want to talk about Wilson Wilson a little bit more.
Oh, yes, please. Oh, I'm
He
sorry.
No, no, no. He had a whole journey, and I felt like this episode
Oh, yeah.
really showed his journey into either becoming Mr. Rabbit or the assistant. And I'll tell you why I think maybe the assistant, but definitely there were so many things that, when he meets Paul at the mall and he sees this guy that's devoted, and at one point, you know, Milner, who is, I feel, very manipulative this episode. Like, she manipulated him so hardcore.
Yeah.
She says to him, if there was another way, we would know. We've been working on this for 30 years. And to me, I don't know if I believe that. Like, I feel like that's almost her hubris, feeling like this is the only way to fix this problem. And when they're at the mall, she looks at Wilson Wilson and says, "Can you do this? Will you do this?" And it's like almost that, like, will you be the next Mr. Rabbit? And he kind of like, and she's like, "Will you do this?" Like, really hammers it on him until he says
She
verbally,
says, I need you to say it.
"I need you to say
Yes.
yes." And he
And then
does.
and then later on she talks about the fact that she has made these decisions before, and now she needs him to make the decision. So she puts him in a situation where their cover is going to be blown. These three people, if they get out and they talk to anybody else, will completely blow the cover of who is Mr. Rabbit? What does that even mean? And
Which is wild
and
because those two guys were working for it. They're working for
yes,
them, and they don't
they're
even
they're
know
part
Mr.
of
Rabbit.
MI5. Yes, and and so it's one of these situations where she makes it clear that they have Ian's brother, they have two people working for MI5 guarding Ian's brother, and now they have a piece of information that if they can get into the public will compromise this entire situation, because then they'll know who, they'll at least have the phrase to spread around of um Milner is Mr. Rabbit. They don't even know what that means, but just being able to spread that around would do enough damage
Oh
to
yeah.
probably bring this whole thing to its knees. And then she explains some of the horrible things. Like, she says that they um there was a school where she killed 6 children or something like that,
Yeah, and pinned it on Grant.
and pinned it on Grant, and she made that decision, and she had to live with that, and then she's like, I need you to make this decision. This to me feels very much like I've done all of this stuff.
Right.
I've found you, and I need you to now take this mantle for me because I can't. I, I don't know if she can carry this weight anymore. I mean, the fact
Right.
that she's kept Jessica Hyde is alive as long as she has feels very nostalgic and not necessarily like bigger
The
picture.
right, not for the benefit of what their plan is, but the it's her own selfish want of holding Jessica Hyde alive.
Yep.
And it was such a there were so many beautiful parts about this scene. Like even at the mall, we see Wilson look at the spoon again. He has the spoon again. And to remind him of where he came from, where he his dad was killed and his eye was taken, and now and you can see that he is struggling with this decision, and he couldn't even kill the guy that took his eyeball. He couldn't kill Lee when he had the
Right.
opportunity, and Lee gave him every chance to kill him, and he had this hard time doing it. And then Milner makes basically Wilson do what they did before to Ian, who, if you remember in the early episodes, he still viewed Ian as a friend. Like, he still was like, I don't want anything to happen to Ian because Ian is my friend. And now he has to kill his brother.
I think he still views Ian as a friend. I don't think that's changed. I think that Ian is a purist, idealist, something along those lines. I don't know exactly what the term is, but he's somebody who believes in the bigger picture.
Right.
And so he doesn't want to do any of this. He thinks this is horrible. He thinks every single one of these atrocities, to some extent, I think they're trying to show you what Milner had to do at some point.
Right.
I think this was the same for Milner because she's saying it. We're not seeing it, but she
Right.
is saying it. She's saying, I've had to make all these choices.
Right.
And now we're seeing it with somebody that we connect with, somebody that we understand, somebody who's been through horrible stuff that is now having to make these decisions, and he kills 3 completely innocent people. One of them is the brother of one of his good friends that he's been through horrible things with.
And now, why I think he might be built up to be the next assistant is,
Yeah, he has a name and he doesn't have a soul patch. And there's no way they can trim it down. It just wouldn't look good on him.
but where did he kill those people at?
Oh, that was a very similar room to what they were in with the assistant in that episode.
When the assistant showed her that he carved himself Mr. Rabbit, they were in that same parking garage that he killed them in.
So he could be like the sacrificial rabbit, if you will, like
Right.
the person that like pretends to be Mr.
He
Rabbit
will
and like
carve it into him.
carves Mr. Rabbit into him so that she can continue to be the real Mr. Rabbit.
And that is the only reason
Oh,
I think he could be set up for the
that's
assistant.
that's some bullshit to like make
Bullshit.
a great theory and make me believe in it and get me so excited about it and then rug pull it and then come up with an even better one that's I don't know. Both of them are great. I don't appreciate you for coming up with either of them. I definitely don't like the fact that you lead me one direction and then come up with another really interesting idea.
It's almost like I'm the Mr. Rabbit and I have a carrot and you're my Wilson and I'm just dangling you along. Come with me, little Sterling. Come here, Mr. Little
Oh,
Rabbit.
it's good. It's really good. Yeah, I can see that.
That
I can
is
definitely see that.
the only reason I came up with the assistant theory. It seemed very close, maybe.
And it's in the same vein. It's very much like my idea of Jessica Hyde can still get pregnant. I was just wrong about how it was. I was
Right.
like, oh, he built in a back door, and so he can turn that off, and so she can get pregnant. She'll be a mom. And it's like, no, I think when you get it, you get it, and there's nothing you can do about it. But if you have the right genetic trait, then it doesn't work. And I think she has that same basic idea. She can get pregnant still. She'll still be a mom. So it's still like the same general idea. But yeah, we've gotten more information. You've tweaked it. It's a very interesting take. I could definitely see either of those being the right one now that we've gotten a little bit more information.
And that's the trick. You have two theories, so one of them's right, and then you're right. That's the whole
Well,
plan. That's the long game I'm playing.
yeah, so my long game I'd be like my two theories are he either is Mr. Rabbit in the end or he isn't Mr. Rabbit. I came up with both of those. Nobody else can come up with either of them, and I'm definitely going to be right.
Okay. Questions. First question. Does Arby know who Anton is? There's that little scene where they have that little conversation. Does he know?
I think he does. I think that's why he took him because why else would he take him?
Right.
Because he didn't take Becky and Ian. He took Grant, possibly only because he's feeling somewhat attached to Grant at this point, and Anton.
Where do you think he's taking Grant? You think he's going to take Grant to Milner?
No, 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 no. I don't think so. Oh, I hope he's not trying to give Milner another RB as Grant. Because he did say that he wasn't going to teach RB or Grant to kill. He was like, I'll because Grant asked if, will you teach me how to shoot? And RB's like, yeah, teach you how to shoot. Will you teach me how to kill? Like, no, I don't think I'll do that.
Yeah. So where is he
So
taking Anton and Grant?
good question that I don't think I know the answer to.
I don't know either. I was hoping I would. I was trying to think of somewhere. I was hoping you would know because I can't figure out where he's taking them. I can't figure out what Arby's goals are. I feel like they have built Arby up to be a much better character with redemption that I feel like he's by the end of this like he's going to do something positive. Like he's doing some shady stuff now. It's a little bit of a fall of his character, but I do feel like he's going to redeem himself like we talked about before. There will
I
be
mean, he's
redemption.
he's already saved at least two lives. That very. I mean, he's left them permanently scarred. Like I love you too. I'm going to put you in a foreign country where you've never been before, and you can't have any bank accounts, and you probably don't speak the language. And good luck. I don't feel like that's giving them a lot of chance to have a great life, but
They're not going to be killed?
hopefully they're not going to be killed. Yes. So that he's giving them a chance that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yes.
So I do feel like we've already seen somewhat of a redemption arc with him. We'll see where it goes from here.
One more question. Final question.
Okay.
Of the main cast, Arby, Jessica Hyde, Ian, Grant, Becky, Milner, of the main cast from the first season, is anybody gonna die this season?
I legitimately thought we were going to lose Milner this episode.
Milner?
Yeah, no, I legitimately thought we were going to lose Milner this episode because with the scene where she came to Dugdale's house and Dugdale knew that she was
Oh,
Mr. Rabbit,
right.
I I was kind of thinking that was, and we already have a replacement for her.
Right.
So it's like Wilson could take over. I'm still gonna say that we can see that like that she's the person we lose because we do have a replacement for her potentially.
Yeah.
That Wilson could step in
Okay.
and it would give a little bit more meaning in him being groomed. Like there's not a ton of time, so unless they were planning on a season 3 and having more payoff for Wilson being groomed, I don't feel like there's a ton of time left for the payoff for what they're going to do with Wilson, but also super fast-paced show, so they probably can actually pay it off somehow.
Yeah.
Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, that's my guess. Is Milner gets 86th,
Anybody else?
Wilson takes over. No, I not off the top of my head, or even the bottom of my head. Any part of my head, I'm gonna say no.
I think Arby's gonna die.
Ooh.
I think Arby's gonna die. Arby and possibly Becky. I think Arby might self sacrifice, and then we see that he redeemed himself by taking a bullet. I also know that Becky's dealing with deals. We now know Donaldson is out. He can't get her any more of the medicine that's stopping her deals. So
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty tough for him to do that after this episode.
she either dies from deals or dies from some other thing. Those are my thoughts.
And with that, I think you're going to have to join us next week on Monday in order to find out if we are right, if we are wrong, to see what we've pulled out of the second to last episode of Utopia UK.
2 episodes left.
Absolutely. And if you have enjoyed our content up to this point, please give us a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell notification so that you can get notifications when our content is uploaded. And this is Sterling and Mark. The road goes ever on and on. Thanks.
Thanks for stopping by.